Welcome to our conversation about the power of play, one of our favorite subjects, actually the highest achievement of man, humankind. Our sponsor Ashoka has been doing a lot of work on playful learning, and it has occurred to me as I've watched their work, they are a network of global entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs, that we as parents, family members, educators, and in fact the whole village that it takes to raise a child are social entrepreneurs. We're nurturing the creativity, the innovation, the empathy, compassion, and initiative of our most precious resource, our children, our human capital. So today I have with me a dynamic trio of people passionate about play. We have Andrew Bollington, who is the global head of research and learning at the LEGO Foundation, which is co-sponsoring the Reimagine Learning Challenge. We have Geralyn McLaughlin, who is the founder of Empowered by Play and the Defending the Early Years project, which she directs, and is also a long-time early childhood educator. And last but not least, we have Dina, Buchbinder, from south of the border here, where she's from Mexico, and she is the founder of Deportes para Compartir. And you will hear more about that later. So, the format of this is going to be, we'll have 3 questions, and our panelists will weigh in. We'll have a lead panelist talking about it and beginning, and then continuing. And the questions are, what's so important about play, and what is the state of play today, and strategies for ensuring that we have a playful future, strategies for change, ensuring the future of childhood and our civil society. So first, I'd just like to say that for the first question, what's so important about play? Well, you know, children are natural learners and natural explorers. They're very creative, they're innovative, they're imaginative. I'd like to quote Alison Gopnik from Berkeley, who's a child psychologist, and she says that children are the R&D division of the human species. They're the brainstormers, the innovators, which I think is a great way to put it. But what's happening today is that we're not honoring play in our teaching and learning. As John Townsend, who's the media manager at Ashoka, wrote in this great piece, which I discovered at Forbes, it's Play the Key to Prosperity. We need to do a different kind of teaching and learning. Children aren't being taught in the right way. So with that, we will go to our panel. So what's so important about play? Geralyn, you've been playing with your children for many years. Tell us what's so important, and then we'll move on to Andrew and Dina.
Okay, great. What's so important about play is basically everything about play is important. That we have decades and decades of research that really speaks to how play is important in every aspect of child development. So children learn and they grow and they understand about the world through play. So whether you're talking about physical development, social emotional development, building up your self-regulation, your cognitive skills, all of those really develop fully through play when a child is engaged fully through quality play. And we can talk a little bit more about that because play has shifted lately, and that has changed the play experience for kids. So when I talk about quality play, I'm talking about, you know, open-ended materials that a child is creating and inventing problems and having to solve problems, like building tower that keeps falling down, and how can I rebuild it to get it as tall as I want it. So that the child is fully engaged in inventing and solving problems. play relieves stress. You know, children are in a stressful world right now, and through play they can work out anxieties and feel empowered through their play. And so there's so many advantages. I've been thinking lately a lot about the language around play, the language experience. So I'm working with 3- and 4-year-olds, and as they're getting ready to learn how to read down the road, one of the most powerful things they can do is engage in language and conversations. So creating a classroom where they are doing dramatic play together, they're, you know, building the fire station, or they're pretending to, you know, have a family, whatever it is, but that those language experiences, that vocabulary that comes from it, that's going to be the foundation for their literacy early on. So, but really, every part of a child development is improved and grows through play.
Thank you, Geralyn. Andrew, what's your take? What's so important about play?
Well, I love what Geralyn was just saying, but perhaps I could just start from the other end of the chain. You know, let's look at some of the problems and the challenges we've got out in life, and how actually, when you work backwards, is play relevant to some of those. You know, I've heard so many people, I've read so much recently, looking at some of the challenges we've got, whether it's the dilemma of having on one hand unemployment, but on the other hand, employers saying they can't employ people with the right skills, or whether it's looking at prison populations and discovering the number of people in prisons who actually dropped out of education. You know, when you look at so many of those problems and social challenges we've got in life, and then start to work backwards and start to say, how did we get into that situation? How did that go wrong? So often I think you find yourself back in those first few years of life, and you look at the skills that children really need to develop if they're going to be successful, if they're going to be productive full members of society. And I think Geralyn just touched on some of those now. It's not about doing more earlier. It's not about sort of teaching them to read or write earlier and earlier. It's actually about making sure they've got some of the underpinning skills on which so much of the rest of their life is going to be based. And I think increasingly we look at things like self-regulation, about early language development, a group of things we call executive functions, early skills in terms of creativity. When you actually look at the skills that children need in order to become lifelong learners, in order to become an effective part of society, I think there's growing evidence that these are the essential underpinning skills on which the rest of learning and indeed much of life is based. And then the other critical thing we know is that play is absolutely one of the best ways of developing those skills. It's the way in which children learn and want to learn and naturally learn, unless frankly you stop them. So it's actually the way we learn best.
Great, that is wonderful. So exciting to hear kindred spirits on this. Dina, what do you think about playful?
Well, actually,
Play.
apart from what Andrew and Geralyn just shared with us now, I think play is one of the most meaningful experiences that children can have, and not only children, but also their teachers, their parents, everyone around children. And it's important that play allows us to connect in a different dimension to very deep fibers within us as human beings that help us develop our creativity, our sense of belonging, our imagination, and therefore it's a very enjoyable way of learning about ourselves and about the rest of our community and take this into a moment that allows you to come up with solutions for the most pressing issues in the world, and you would generally don't think that plays like it so far, but it's amazing to see how children actually really can connect to their greatest side and discover the possibilities within them and to become change makers. So play is that possibility.
Wow, that's very, very well laid out. I think that, when I was listening to you, Dina, I was thinking, and all of you, in fact, I'm so excited about, the fact that this is a new movement, really playing to learn, because I think that there is not enough, people need to be educated about it. And so that really brings us to, our second question, which is, what is the state of play today? Because you would think that if we know that play is so essential, why are we getting rid of it? Why and what? Why are we creating societies in which this essential human activity is not thriving? And there was a study done in 2011 by a professor of education at the College of William and Mary in the United States, and she looked at the Torrance creativity scale, and she found a real decline in creativity, particularly among kindergartners through sixth graders. But also, more telling was that she also saw a dip in sort of emotional and verbal expressiveness, the ability to look at another's perspective, to take another perspective, which is so essential. Really a decline in imagination and initiative. These are all, as Andrew said, these are just such important skills for our prosperity, for our well-being, as a global society. So, where do you come down with this? On the state of play, what, Dina, Andrew, what would you say is the state of things? I mean, where you sit at LEGO?
I've been really interested to read the report that Ashoka has just published as part of our Reimagine Learning work, which is based on interviewing a whole range of existing change makers of Ashoka Fellows. And actually one of the questions they were asked is what they saw as the major barriers to their work, what's actually stopping a lot of good things developing and going further. And I was fascinated because the number one barrier that was identified was described as the fact we don't really value whole child development.
Right.
And again, I think that's really interesting. If we don't really value whole child development, then actually it's very easy to sort of say, well, play is just nice to have rather than essential to have. And at first my reaction was, well, surely that can't be true. I haven't met many parents who don't say that whole child development is important. And they don't think of the children as being rounded human beings with all sorts of skills. But actually, I think when you look at the world and when you look at many of our education systems, the reality is they do prioritize things other than whole child development. We've got an obsession on believing that literacy and numeracy and content acquisition are the principal objectives of school systems. And again, literacy and numeracy are important things. I don't want to say we don't want those, but I think we've got systems at the moment that are set up to measure that. And of course, this is a problem. It's easy to measure literacy and numeracy. It's much harder to measure some of the broader skills that actually in our hearts we know are much more important. And I think when you mix these things together, we do have a world that in reality has a mismatch between what we probably believe and know is important for us as human beings and for taking a full place in society versus what our education system is optimized and set up to produce. And I think that's causing real challenges at the moment.
It is, in fact, one of the challenges that it's causing, as Geralyn knows, is that there are children who are being expected to do things that are developmentally really hard for them. And we are having, in the United States, we are seeing preschoolers expelled.
So, yes, Peter Gray did a study in the psychopathology around children and teenagers and how the rise of psychopathology in the same time as this play is disappearing, things like children's depression is rising, expulsions from school, and like you said, Susan, even for the youngest kids, because now we have in the United States this race to the top and the early learning challenge, so that those academic pressures, which were already creeping in, have creeped in even more and pushed down even more. And so those academic expectations are out of sync with the real intellectual pursuits that early childhood children can actually engage in. They are curious, they are creative and innovative, and they are thinking about physics and all kinds of gravity, or on their terms, in their exploring ways, and not in this didactic instruction where you have to meet this standard at this age of 5, and the teacher's being more directed because she feels this pressure, like her children have to know how to count to 100 by the end of kindergarten or something like that. So
right.
I think that's a huge part of the situation. And this play, the idea that play is a 4-letter word, like it's a waste of time or extra.
Exactly. And I'm sorry, there is research now that is showing that kindergarten is really, not only is it the new first grade, but it doesn't look at all like first grade in the late 90s in the United States, preceding our current education reforms. And I think that this is evidence that of the real shift that has taken place.
I think there's lots of different elements to it. So there's schools and the message that schools are giving parents, and there's also the messages that parents are receiving from the commercialization of childhood. The pressure to get this gadget or this electronic toy that's going to teach your child to get ahead. So parents think that their children need kind of gadgety electronics. I don't know if you hear the school and the noise next door. It's kids playing, if you hear that.
Dina,
and so well, okay, but I just...
I'd like to, Geralyn, can I stop you for a second, just because I would like to talk about another aspect of the state of play, and that is children's physical health. And Dina, I thought that I see that Mexico has the highest child obesity rate. I don't know where that data came from, but I noticed that in reading about your organization. So I wondered what you were thinking about in terms of physical well-being and health.
Also play is a wonderful channel to get children moving and active. As you say, Mexico is #1 for child obesity in the world, and more than 1/3 of Mexican children is overweight.
Wow.
This has amazing costs for treating preventable health problems that result from obesity, and US is #2. So we have to get our kids moving.
Really?
Yes, and it's really a great opportunity for play to also become not only this possibility to get children moving, but also moving in a way, in a twofold, mentally, physically, and of course emotionally, because play does bring great motivation to everyone. I am impressed always to see that in the beginning of our training sessions with teachers, sometimes the teachers have a blast when they're during the training, and when they are about to implement this same methodology with their children, you can see how some of the teachers are scared to play. Why?
Yeah.
Play in a long time. It's not a regular methodology to use play, an essential part of learning. It's usually, there's a tendency to regard it as a lost time. It replicates with parents. So when finally teachers and educators are implementing play as a fundamental way to teach, guess what? Parents think that then teachers are losing time within their classes and schools. So it's important to also include get parents involved in this whole new paradigm for the education of the 21st century.
Absolutely. Thank you. That was so well said. And Andrew, that leads me to the question about a poll of parents that I noticed on the LEGO Foundation's website, which found parents remarkably aware of the importance of whole child development, of play, for imagination. Tell us about that, because there seems, in some ways, it feels in the United States, as Geralyn said, the parents are very anxious about having their kids get ahead, and we've got this ed reform policy that's racing to the top. But I found this poll reassuring, and I wondered what you're seeing in your travels with parents.
So the poll on our website was actually conducted by Disney, and it was from parents in the UK asking a range of questions about how they perceived play and their role in this and so on. And it's an interesting set of findings. I think for us, one of the broader conclusions we'd take out of it is that, of course, every parent wants the best for their children, and I think as a parent, it's often difficult to actually work out what that really means. It's too easy to find yourself outside the school gate, getting into discussions of it's almost like an arms race, isn't it? Is your child reading the New York Times at the age of 6 or not? And I think it's very easy for that to start to happen. I think at the LEGO Foundation, one of the things we've realized is that part of what we need to do is really change attitudes and behaviors around this, and part of that is actually helping parents and others to understand what is really developmentally appropriate for their children at different ages. And I think great early childhood experiences, great kindergarten and primary experiences, if they're going to be really appropriate for children, need to be quite different from the kind of formal school experiences that, of course, many parents grew up and had themselves. We now understand so much more about how children learn in the best possible ways at different ages. And of course, the other thing is this goes well outside school as well. In a pressured-in world where it's very tempting to take children from activity to activity and event to event, I think there's growing evidence to say that children also need time with other children, time to play, time to learn from that, time to interact with their parents and others. Huge benefits come from this. And I think part of what we're trying to do is to explain that more clearly, help parents realize the huge benefits that come from play and learning through play without having to overstructure life and overstructure whether that's formal or informal.
Right, that's great. It also reminded me that I'd like to just add that children need time for daydreaming, for being just being, and I think that that's very, very hard to find today, because we know that in those times of just reverie and musings, when no one's around, can come what Eleanor Duckworth from Harvard, wonderful education professor, called the having of wonderful ideas. So it's great that you're kind of spreading that gospel. So important. Geralyn, how do you find it, your parents? Do they understand? Do they get it?
It varies. It really varies. I think for right now, I have three parents of 3-year-olds, and so it's that pressure. I'm not feeling it. That maybe in kindergarten parents are starting to feel that pressure and want that academic. So right now when I'm meeting them as parents of 3-year-olds, they're not really worried about that, and they are embracing the play because their real goal is for their child to be happy at school. It's a big step going to a big school when you're 3. So in that sense, I am lucky, but I do think that overarching trend is out there, and I agree with Andrew 100% about that scheduled time that children have. So much of even their downtime is scheduled, and how that's a different kind of play when it's an organized, like a little league or something like that. There's benefits to that. I'm not arguing that, but when children are left their own selves to play with multi-ages, where you have younger children and the older children are mentoring, the play out in the neighborhood. And when the children are developing the rules for the game, the research shows that the children are more active in the game because they want to develop the rules so that they can keep it moving, so it's fun, and there's less of when the adults have structured the baseball game. There's a lot of sitting and watching, and how it's just a very different experience for kids to be having that multi-aged play, and that's something that we don't see anymore for so many reasons. And
right. That is such a good point, and I don't know if any of you saw the cover article of the Atlantic magazine, which was about overprotected, or the kids being overprotected by Hannah Rawson. And I had, in your part of the world, Andrew, and in the Nordic countries, they let young children do things that in the United States would bring on a lawsuit. And I think that we all may have these intentions of educating parents, of really, of supporting them, because it's such a challenging job. We all know that. But on the other hand, how do we get that message out in a culture where, parents are hovering like helicopters from the get-go, through college?
I think that's one of the reasons we constantly talk about learning through play, because actually I think parents need to begin to appreciate the value and the benefits that come out of play, and that's constantly why we put the phrase learning through in front of play. I think once you appreciate the huge benefit that comes out of play, it becomes easier to find the time, prioritize it, and so on, over all the other things that the parents otherwise might feel obliged to have their children doing. And I think it's fascinating when you look at so many of the skills that we understandably want young people to develop. When you start to work backwards and to say, what do you need to develop before you can learn to read? What are the skills you need before you're going to be an effective reader, for example? You actually get back to some underlying things that research points at, that actually play is one of the best ways of developing. Right. So rather than jumping straight into reading and finding it really hard, and because you're doing it too early and too soon and you haven't developed the prerequisite skills, play is actually one of the best ways of getting there. These are tough things to explain. I can give you a personal anecdote as well, because I'm in Switzerland, which is now my home, and I moved there recently from the UK. And I think the UK, unfortunately, shares some of the paranoia about childhood that you were mentioning in the UK. Outside my home here now in Switzerland, I've got a nursery with 5-year-olds, under 5, coming into this nursery, and every day the children walk into that nursery themselves. They're not taken by parents. Now, back at home in the UK, that would have caused horror. How could these parents be abandoning these kids and so on? But actually, there's a society here that sort of values that and looks after those kids and doesn't feel that they need to be all marched into school themselves. I don't know how there's lots of risks, and I'm having just come out of a big city of London myself, I'm not pretending that would be possible in most of the places where people listening are, but it's an interesting thing about, what are those 5-year-olds learning by walking to school themselves, the responsibility, learning how to cross a road, learning how to look after each other. These are really tough things that actually, because of the way society has changed, our children aren't now learning until much, much later. And I look at those kids with a great deal of envy and wish that, that was an experience that more people had. We've got to find new ways of doing that, because I know most of our societies can't do it now.
Yeah, that's beautifully put, Andrew, and it is a challenge because we are living in different times. I think we're going to move on to the last segment, which is really to look at the strategies for change, and you are all change makers, and we really want to look at ensuring that kind of, that childhood is preserved, and that we are really creating the foundations of a civil society of caring, prosperous citizens. On the website of Deportes para Compartir, there is a lovely tagline, and it said, "We form model citizens." My English translation, Dina, you'll have to forgive me. It's probably not so great. But Dina, how do you see this? You seem to have that big picture take on it.
Sure, it's a great translation. That's what we do through play and physical activity involving play. We form better citizens, because how are we supposed to learn about civic values, for instance, no? Which is one of the most important aspects of having better citizens. And we speak a lot about values in schools and everywhere, but there's a huge difference between speaking about values and actually living values and making a practice out of them every day. So we translate civic values and the global issues, the most pressing global issues, through games where children play, have fun, participate, and also are invited to think about questions of how they feel during the game, what would be their proposal to solve that issue that we are looking at in the game. And so it's an amazing opportunity, not only to play, have fun, enjoy, but also to realize the potential that lies within, and to translate it into actions that will make the difference in your community. So this will make you, that a 10-year-old girl told us recently, this is the first time in her life she felt useful. So imagine, or valued. No? So imagine play also becoming an avenue for you to realize that you are a valuable person, a useful person in your community, and this can change history, because I don't know how many adults feel that they are actually transforming their community just because they don't know they can. So if we realize this since very young ages, we have the potential and the possibility in front of us to have a complete different outlook on everything that we're worried about, from simple things to very, very complex issues that we have to deal with, such as violence, corruption, apathy, discrimination. These are the actual tools, specific tools, that will allow us to grow to the world that we want to live in.
That is wonderful. Dina, when I'm thinking about what I'm homing in on, is that sense of value as a person too. Because, as Geralyn can tell you, and those of us who know about, early childhood development, that, that's the foundation. That is the core, that sense of self-efficacy and value. I'm also thinking about an experience that I had with my daughter on the soccer field. She was 10, and the girls would stop one another when someone on the other team got hurt. So I saw that as a way of, developing compassion as well. So Geralyn, tell us about how you are making change. I'd love to hear about the early years project.
Absolutely. So at Defending the Early Years, we're really looking at ways to help mobilize people, whether you're a parent or a teacher, around this play issue. And And the good news is that with the Common Core standards are so not appropriate, that parents are paying attention now. Like, that they're really getting, around the country, parents are starting to say, wait a minute, this isn't good, this isn't right. My child used to like math, and now my child hates it. And so parents are wanting to find out more, and they're wanting to talk. So we want people who are thinking about this to be able to talk to each other and share information. So on our Defending the Early Years website, we have a mobilization kit, and it has fact sheets for parents around play and around the, standards, and it has a PowerPoint that talks all about play, helps parents really understand the importance. Like we said, we have to educate. Andrew was talking about that. Educate, and we're going on it from this grassroots level. And so we actually have mini grants on our website also for folks who want to start an action, who want to start a group meeting and talking about this in their communities. And so because sometimes it's hard to do that, you need some money for flyers or to have some food or whatever. So we thought these action mini grants would help parents and teachers bring folks together to talk about these issues and to figure out how to get our legislators to understand what we are understanding. So I think we're really excited about it. So you can check out Defending the Early Years, DEYproject.org. And I do want to say about the reasonable risks we're talking about around play is that there is also this adventure playground movement in the United States. The Alliance for Childhood has been working on it, and it came from the UK originally, but it's helping kids take those reasonable risks outside in adventure playgrounds with a playmaker there to kind of just make sure, everyone's because really right now kids are losing that ability to play together. So that's one reason why kids don't play together so much, because they fight a lot if they haven't practiced playing together, or they, so I think the adventure playground movement from the Alliance for Childhood is also something to pay attention to.
Andrew, what are you thinking?
I'm going to just deliberately pull a really different example, actually, because we're doing many things, so I'm lucky I can choose from several. But our conversation is focused on particularly developed countries, UK, USA, and so on, where I think there's one set of challenges. I guess some of our work as a foundation as well is also in developing world countries, and of course over the last 10, 15 years we've seen huge progress in terms of access to universal primary education as a result of the Millennium Development Goals. Still more to do, of course, but nevertheless, I think one of the most successful shifts and changes at a global level. And that, of course, increasingly is raising questions now about what else matters apart from access to primary education. And I think the debate is saying, well, there are really two obvious things. One is the quality of that education. When students get there, are they bored? Are they just sitting passively in classrooms, or are they actually engaged in a way that's appropriate? And then the second piece is that, of course, we know that 6 years of primary education doesn't educate a workforce or a society, that we need more than that. And increasingly the evidence shows the importance of early childhood. So a lot of our work is in countries where we're looking to try and persuade policymakers, governments and so on of the importance of quality early learning. And I guess in a group like this, I don't need to say that for us, play is really at the very heart of quality early learning. We believe that's the developmentally the most appropriate way for children to do that. So that's an example of something we're doing. It's more in the background. It's more sort of lobbying, advocating, talking to people about that, and making sure that that raises up the agenda in a large number of countries who are now beginning to adopt policies and to fund early childhood. which is excellent. We just want to make sure they don't make the mistakes of simply dragging down the worst of primary education and putting it into the sort of kindergarten and earlier age ranges. And of course, one of the other great things we've been doing is working with Ashoka and working with this Reimagine Learning Challenge, because one of the things we really want to understand is all the great things that are going on out there in the world. And we know we weren't the first to come up and realize this. There's actually masses of excellent practice going on out there at the moment. And we think one of the things that Ashoka does uniquely well is understand where that innovation is going on, help to connect people together, help to map it. And our interest in that is not only to encourage that because we think it's good, but it's also to learn from it, to spot where is the real innovation going on, where is the good practice, and are there ways in which we could help to spread that around, make good practice in one country visible in another, and to see that nurture and grow over time.
Can we bottle that, Andrew? That is just wonderful wisdom. And I want to say that although here in the United States we are certainly a developed country, we have one in almost 4 children under 6 who's living in poverty. So what I wanted to add is that for children who are living in poverty and the toxic stresses that are that accompany it often, play is really important because they need to be able to work out their yayas, their whole social emotional stuff, and social emotional development is joined at the hip with cognitive. I think we're just going to wrap up now. Do we have any final comments from anyone? I loved what Andrew had to say. I think it perfectly sums up what we need to do on a global scale and what we need to do in our local communities all across the world. And the other thing is that those who would like to submit ideas about the Reimagine Learning Challenge that Andrew mentioned, which they're partnering with Ashoka on, can send their ideas to http Ashoka changemakers.com and then /play to learn. Play, numeral 2, and learn. Thank you all for the most really fantastic conversation about play. I'm very delighted to be part of it, and I hope we'll be able to continue it. Thanks.
Thanks, Susan.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Ashoka.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.